Your life is entirely comprised of habits and patterns. And your ability to recognize those patterns and change your patterns is what is the most important skill you need to have in order to achieve anything. You need to know when you're falling short and when you're in a pattern of bad behavior and you're in a behavior that is not fruitful for you, and you need to learn to change it. And you also need to know when you're having a good pattern and you have to water the plants, you have to water the fruits, you have to facilitate it even more. You have to lean into it even more. You need to learn and recognize when you're having good patterns of behavior, when you're having bad patterns of behavior, when you're having things that benefit you or you're having things that distract you from your ultimate goal of life, which is to achieve some level of fulfillment, some level of career, some level of success in any way, in any realm, in any aspect, in any situation, and in any field. So I'm going to be giving you the formula as to how you can break bad habits of pattern and how you can recognize good habits of pattern. Pattern recognition. It's Tony Robbins talks about the importance of seeing patterns and being able to change them. And of course, James Clear is like the habits guy, the importance of habit and how you can change habit to actually improve in your life. As humans, we are creatures of habit. Our brains are very simple. You do one thing and you're going to want to do that thing over and over again because it gives you some sort of a reward, whether it's like a dopamine reward, whether it is satisfaction of some kind, whether if it's like a deeper level of fulfillment. It could be good, it could be bad. If it is good, you can absolutely lean into it even more, but if it is bad, you need to stop and you need to change it. But obviously, I'm just saying words right now. Like, it is easier said than done because you can just say, "Oh, just change, right? Just stop doing that bad thing," right? That's why addictions are so bad. It's like, "Oh, just stop, just stop doing those drugs, or stop drinking, stop smoking, stop watching porn, stop doing any of that stuff." It's much harder to do in reality because once your brain has unlocked that pattern, it's unlocked that pathway, you're going to have that cue and that moment of temptation, and it's going to be very hard for you to resist because you're just so used to that feeling and you're so used to doing that thing. But it is very bad for you, and it is a very huge distraction from of course achieving something better, achieving something more fruitful in your life. Of course, those are like the more extreme examples, but it can also, and it is also, something as simple as scrolling, for example, something as simple as watching garbage content online, getting into Twitter debates, for example, like those types of things are also bad patterns of behavior that don't get anything done. They just waste your time, and they are distractions that are distracting you from your goals, distracting you from what you should be doing, what you know you should be doing but aren't doing. Whatever it may look like in your life, even those things are ways to do it. Social media is a big, big distraction. It is a big, big negative pattern of behavior. Just the going through and scrolling social media, because what it does is it's the addiction of stimulation. It is the pattern of stimulation, the habit of stimulation. You're just constantly being stimulated with a new input every 20 seconds to a minute, because that's what happens when you scroll. When you're just going through things, you're watching different videos, you're laughing at different things. Your brain is not designed to do that. Like, your brain is not designed to just constantly shift its focus every second. And then the pattern becomes the wanting to scroll, which is just the wanting to be stimulated in different ways. And it is that, like, that cheap dopamine hit. And then all that does is it's wasting time. You're just consuming garbage content, and it's not allowing you to, of course, do what you need to do to go and achieve things in your life. So all of it is a pattern. All of it is a pattern. It's negative patterns, and you're just opening the door to bad habits in your brain, and it's much harder to overcome them and to push through them. But the formula that I figured out, the way that you actually need to push through bad habits, to overcome bad habits. You can defeat bad patterns of habit. The way you defeat bad patterns of habit is by doing something so drastically different to the norm that it forces your brain to change. It forces your mind to focus on different things. You might have to do that drastically different thing multiple times, but it takes that level of stimulation that allows you to move in a different direction. Your mind focuses on patterns. And if you're in bad patterns of behavior, bad patterns of habit, you need to do something that just shakes it. You need to shake your brain to the core. You need to shake it and truly it needs to be something that gives your brain that, like, wake up call, that shock factor, that whoa factor, that's something completely different and completely contrary to the habits that you had before. That is the way that you break bad habits of behavior. And that is the way you break bad patterns and you replace them with better things. That's the way you overcome distractions and replace distractions with actually productive things, is by doing something completely different. I try and think of examples. I'm going to try and think of examples in real time and think and give it to you in terms of examples as to where this would make sense. Something that makes sense, the first thing that kind of comes up in my mind is if you're a person who doesn't have a girlfriend, who's scared to approach girls, talk to girls, for example, the way you break that bad pattern of behavior and that bad fear is by just one day going up and just saying, screw it, and just going for it, right? That's how you break it. You break that pattern by doing that thing, and maybe you have to do it a couple of times, but then your brain will have those new pathways, those new patterns, which are like asking girls out, realizing that rejection isn't that bad, and then you can just go and be fully confident in any interaction and situation you have with a woman ever. Which that's obviously good. That's beneficial for you if you're looking for a relationship. In terms of just productivity, in terms of just the work that you get done, you need to do something so drastically different that you get more work done, right? So say you have a phone addiction, the doing something drastically different is, for example, you put all of your productive apps on one side and you put all of the distracting apps on another side. You put productive apps on your first screen and then you put the distracting apps on a second screen. So that every time you look at your phone, you're only looking at stuff that's going to help you. Or the drastic thing is you just delete all social medias and you just remove yourself from that part online. And when you're getting work done, you do something which is just, you spend, I don't know, like I'm just trying to think, like what would that one thing be if you're trying, like for example, if you're sitting at your computer, you work from home or something like that, you're running a business, you're doing something online, whatever it is, that drastic thing is to perhaps when you are working for a couple hours and you start to feel drained, that drastic thing is to maybe just make a different type of content, make a different type of ad or whatever thing you're trying to push out. I'm just trying to think about like this one's not really a good example, but I'm just trying to think about what it would look like. It's just maybe doing 2 or 3 things that are a little bit different, that maybe you're doing, you're pushing out more content, you're doing more things that you wouldn't have normally done. For example, like if you're doing something from home, doing something on your computer to be productive. I think that's kind of an idea, that's an example. And yeah, if you're not enjoying the work you're doing, for example, like if you're working a job and you're not enjoying it, think about to yourself, like I can't really think of many ideas because I'm not in that moment right now in my life, but you can think to yourself, what's a couple of things that you can do that can shake the patterns, right? Like say you work at Walmart and you're stocking shelves. Why don't you just stock it in a different way? Like just make a different pattern and make a different design when you're stocking the shelves, for example. Like just sometimes you can make just a fun design and fun thing. That can be a thing that changes the pattern, makes it maybe a little bit more interesting, and gives your brain something else to focus on instead of the negativity that comes with working a job that isn't so fruitful like that. For example, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm just kind of giving things that make sense kind of in my mind right now that I'm thinking about right now. But the point is, it's all about patterns. It's all about habits. It's all about things, and you do one thing and your brain wants to cling to that thing and just repetition, right? If you're repeating good things, you're going to do well. If you're repeating bad things and distractions, it's going to only hinder you and stop you and slow you down from achieving all of the great successes and things that you want to achieve, that you can achieve, that is possible to achieve. You're just kind of keeping yourself put. You're keeping yourself stimulated. You're keeping yourself kind of sterile when it comes to actually the science and the philosophy, the psychology of human achievement. If you want to actually go out and get something, it's going to take setting yourself patterns that actually move you in that direction. Because like a pattern is a pathway in your mind. A pattern is like I'm trying to genuinely break it down. Like I'm definitely not as good as talking about these things as like a guy like Tony Robbins or James Clear or any of the other like hardcore kind of Alex Hormozy, hardcore like improvement growth mindset people. I'm not as good as talking about it, but I'm trying my best to kind of break it down as best of ways I possibly can. That everything stems from a pattern. Everything that you do, everything that you think about stems from a pattern. There are thought patterns, patterns of behavior, patterns of action, patterns of consumption, patterns that are distractions, patterns that are productive. Every single thing that you do is because of a pattern. Even me recording this podcast episode is because of a pattern. And the pattern is I wake up early, I pray, I do some stretching, I go down and go over what things I need to do for the day, and then I plug in the microphone, I test my microphone, I start the recording, and then I get going and talk about whatever the topic is for the day. That's a pattern. And it's a pattern that I've been getting into so much that now this is just kind of an automatic thing for me. And this is a good pattern. It's a pattern of me being productive. It's creating content, not consuming something better for me. But there are other patterns that I have that are negative. And I think the secret way to just destroying your negative patterns for good and replacing them with better is by doing something so drastically different that it shakes up your brain and it shocks your mind into doing something different, into that new pattern of behavior. And it has to be that kind of whoa factor. So whatever it may look like, whatever it may be, if you have like a limiting belief, if you have a thing that is stopping you from doing something better in whatever realm and aspect of life, if you do something so contrary to your current patterns that it shakes up your mind, that will move you into the direction of pursuing better things and having better patterns of behavior and doing more productive things instead of distracting things, being more diligent in your business instead of slothful. I think that is truly like the secret. That is kind of the secret to defeating your pattern. To first of all, you recognize your pattern recognition, recognize every good or bad pattern that you have in your life, and then pattern manipulation, which is you're able to change it. You're able to change you're able to change bad into good and lean into the good even more. And again, like just taking action, changing. Sometimes as humans, we have so much friction when it comes to change because we're so embedded in our patterns and habits. But sometimes those patterns and habits actually aren't good for us. The change is much more necessary. Here's one example, right? Here's an example. Guy works a 9-to-5 job. He's living paycheck to paycheck, but he becomes content with the failure. He becomes content with the misery. He becomes okay, and he's able to rationalize that bad pattern, which is like you're just kind of going about life and going about the motions, and life is taking you where it will. The example of that type of a person. And then something happens in their family where it's an emergency and someone has to go to the hospital, and they don't have any money to cover it. They don't have any money set aside to cover it because they work paycheck to paycheck and they just spend all of their money. They're in debt and they're dealing with these circumstances. That type of a moment is that shock factor to the brain, where that type of moment makes that person realize, oh, I actually am just falling down this terrible pathway and I've just been letting this take over in my life. Let's go and let's try something different. And then that's how people start side hustles. That's how people start to work a second job. That's how people start to do better with their money, with their finances, trying to get out of debt and actually save a little bit more. That's how people start an emergency fund. That's how people start savings accounts and start investing in those kinds of things. Because it takes that kind of change in behavior, that thing that shocked your mind, that really woke you up to the fact that your pattern is bad. It allows you to recognize just how bad your patterns were. And it allows you to have that kind of motivation and drive to changing those patterns, to shaking those patterns, and to overcoming those bad behaviors and replacing them with good behaviors. So I think that's a great example. Like, it's a very, very common thing in this world, right? The person who just works a 9-to-5 and just lets life kind of pass them by a little bit. And it takes that kind of emergency situation, that fight or flight mode, that causes them to realize the pathway that they were going on and make that change to actually improve. And when someone kind of is able to make that change, right, they manage to go from working that 9-to-5 to then having that financial freedom. It took that big moment and it took that thing that allowed them to change and allowed them to realize just where they were falling short. I think that's a great example. It's a great, great example of this whole idea of pattern recognition, of recognizing good habits and bad habits, and seeing where things in life are taking you down a bad path, and striving and doing something different, something drastically different to change that pattern. I think that type of a thing is a great example of that. So I'm glad that I managed to give you guys a good example of it, because that type of thing is a very common thing in the world today. And it's a very common thing that people are dealing with in the world today, right? You think about health, right? Sometimes you don't realize when you're getting fat. Sometimes you don't realize when you're letting yourself go, and it only takes you one day to look in the mirror and you lift your shirt up and you're like, whoa, when did that happen? Sometimes you don't even realize it until you're at the point where you're too far gone. And that's the shock factor. They realize, whoa, what the hell? Like, I used to be like fit. I used to be skinny. I used to be good. And now I'm not. What the hell happened? Right? Like, what the hell happened? It takes that kind of switch to flick in your mind. That is that drastic thing, that shock factor, and that allows you to recognize where you fall short and move forward and do better, right? So again, I just gave example from health, wealth, and relationships. Those are the three biggest things that anyone at any time in their lives wants to improve, right? Those are the three biggest pain points that people have in their lives. So those were three examples I gave. I gave the relationship one before with the asking girls out, the cold approaching type of thing, the wealth, and now the health. So to change your patterns, in summary, to change your patterns, to change your habits, it takes that moment of realization, that drastic change in ideas and in your mindset, that change in your behaviors. Sometimes it is that whoa moment where you realize where things are going wrong and then you start to take steps to improve. Or it is just you're doing things wrong but you can't get out of it, so you need to do something that is so far against the norm, so different, so drastically different from that pattern to change the pathways in your mind to get it focused on that different thing instead of the negative pattern that you have. So we're all about patterns. We're all about habits in our mind. Our mind is lazy. Our mind sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, wants us to do the path of least resistance because our mind wants to waste as little energy as possible, right? So it's up to you as the conscious person, as the disciplined person, to recognize, okay, this is a good pattern, so let's feed into this more. Let's be more consistent with this good pattern, right? For example, like me recording a podcast. You wake up in the morning, you work out in the morning, you record a podcast, you make some content, you get your work done in the morning. For example, that's a good pattern of behavior. Be consistent with it. That's maybe the next step to having a good pattern and a good habit, being consistent with it. And again, showing up every day, doing your daily things, right? And then a bad pattern of behavior, you realize it's a bad pattern. First of all, recognizing when it's a bad pattern, and then doing something or feeling something drastically different from that pattern that will allow you to take steps to change. That makes change a lot easier. And it makes change a lot more frictionless because you know in your mind just how bad the pattern is and you have that kind of deep desire to improve and change yourself. You need to find that, though. You need to find that within yourself by doing something drastically different, by finding the complete opposite end to the current bad habit that you're facing, and then just continue to act on those different things to truly change your pattern. And you know that habits are developed within like a month, let's say, is a good time. So you need to be doing those good things for a month and shaking off those bad things for over a month. And you need to continue to have that in your mind. The reason to change must be greater than the reason to stay the same. The thing stopping you from achieving your potential is not your competition. It is the distractions you insist on keeping in your life rather than doing the work that you need to be doing, that you know you should be doing but aren't doing. That's an Alex Hormozi quote, but it is so true. It is something that I was literally reviewing this morning when it comes to my own bad habits and patterns of behavior that I need to shake off as well. But that is the point of this episode. The reason to change must be greater than the reason to stay the same. It needs to be that shock factor. It needs to be that thing that is so drastically different from your thought patterns, from your patterns of behavior, patterns of action, patterns of consumption, that's so drastically different that it shakes up your mind, it snaps you back into position, and allows you to move forward in a better way. So in many different aspects in life, this thing can happen. But sometimes you fall off the wagon and you don't even realize it. You need to catch yourself when you're falling into a bad pattern. Recognize the pattern, be able to change the pattern, and improve in your life by leaning into the good and truly improving and moving away from the bad. Habits are powerful. Don't underestimate how powerful habits and patterns of behavior are in your life because everything that you do is a pattern, either for good or for bad. Try your best to move all things into as good of patterns as you possibly can have in your life every day. So that's all I got to say for this episode. I hope I broke it down as good of a way as possible. Again, as I said before, during this episode, I'm not like the pro and the expert on it in comparison to other internet people. They definitely break it down way better than I just broke it down today, but I hope that I did a good job in kind of giving you just like the overview and like the basic type of insights in terms of this whole concept of patterns of behavior and patterns of life and habits that we have every day as human beings. I hope I did a good job breaking it down. I tried my best. I ended up finding a couple of good examples, so I hope I did a good job there. But please let me know what you think in the comments. Show your support on the show if you did enjoy this episode. If you do think that I did do a good job, show your support by leaving a like, by subscribing on YouTube, by following on Spotify, and by, of course, showing that in your life you can make those changes in your habits and in your patterns of behavior as well to truly improve, to truly do better, to truly shake off those bad habits and improve with good habits. That hopefully this can be that framework that you can use. Remember, do something drastically different from your current negative habit to turn it into something better. That is the way. That is the way. I truly do think that is the way. You need to truly shake off those limiting beliefs and limiting factors in your mind by doing something and by just stepping into something completely different. So I hope that this video can serve as a level of inspiration for you to take some of those actions, to do some of those very different things, to improve, to shake off those patterns and habits, and to truly go out there and reach that potential that you have, that each and every one of us has in this life, on this planet, as a human being. So thank you for watching this episode of the 365 podcast. That is all I gotta say for today. I tried my best to make it a good message, so I really hope that it was good for you. So thank you for watching, and I sign off in the way I always do. Continue to glorify God every day throughout your life, and as always, I will see you tomorrow for the next episode of the 365 podcast.